right, now we're going to note 6-16, which is factoring trinomials, and we're going to do day 2 now. Last lesson for the unit, woo! Okay, we're going to warm up by just factoring a normal trinomial by checking for GCF. If the leading coefficient is 1, there's not a GCF. So if this number is a 1, you can go straight to your x. I'm going to write my x over here. It'll give me more room. Okay, so 1 times 45 is 45, and then 14 has to go in the middle. So multiples of 45 would be 1 and 45, 3 and 15, 5 and 9. Okay, this adds to 46, subtracts to 44, not the number I want. This adds to 18, subtracts to 12, not the number I want. This adds to 14. So 5 plus 9 gives me 14. So I put a 5 here and a 9 here. Now we divide by that leading coefficient of 1, which this would be 5 and this would be 9. So my factors would be x plus 5 and x plus 9. Okay, I'm going to do number 3, and then you have to try 2 and 4. Okay, so for number 3, it does have a coefficient, so I'm going to check. Since 2 and 2 are the same, when we do this in the calculator, math number 9, all you have to do is 2, 24. You don't need to check both numbers. But now, remember, over here, you may need to check all of them in case you don't know. 2 and 24, the GCF would have to be 2. They all don't share a letter, so I'm going to redivide, and that's going to give me a squared plus a minus 12. Okay, so for my x, 1 times negative 12 is negative 12, and then my GCF my sum has to be 1 because there's a 1 there. So 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. This adds to 13, subtracts to 11. This adds to 8, subtracts to 4. This adds to 7, subtracts to 1. So we want to do 4 minus 3 to get to positive 1. So I'm going to put a negative 3 and a positive 4. Divide by that leading coefficient, the new one, of 1. That gives me negative 3. That gives me 4. So I write my GCF first, which is 2. And then I would have, this is a minus 3 and a plus 4. And there would be my answer. Okay, now when you're factoring with without a GCF, but there's a trinomial and the first number is not a 1, yeah, we're not doing all of this. We're going to do the exact same thing we've been doing. So, therefore, I'm going to do all the odds with you, and then you'll have to try the evens, which there's not as many problems today. So the first thing I would suggest is if you have a GCF, okay, so math number 9, if we're going to do 2, 5, if it gives you a 1, there is not a GCF. So the first thing you are going to do is open up that x. We're going to do 2 times 3, which is 6. And then the GCF, the sum has to be 5. So multiples of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it. Now I need them to add to 5. So 1 plus 6 will not add to 5, but you could do 6 minus 1 to get to 5. And 2 plus 3 also adds to 5. So you kind of are stuck a little bit on this one, and you just have to pick. So I'm actually going to grab a pencil, and we're going to just try really quick. Okay, so if I did 6 minus 1, so if I put a negative 1 and a 6 right here, if I divide by that leading coefficient of 2, this can simplify to negative 1/2, and this can simplify to 3. So therefore, when you have a fraction answer, you rewrite it as the denominator is 2x, the denominator, minus 1. So the denominator goes with the x, and then the other piece goes in the back. And then this would just be x plus 3 because it's not a fraction. Now, if I multiply these, this gives me 2x squared. This gives me 6x. This gives me negative 1x. And this gives me negative 3. So I can already pause and stop and look. I should not be getting a negative 3. So I do not want to use that one. So I'm going to erase what I did. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to use 2 and 3 because 2 plus 3 gives me 6. I'm going to put a 2 and put a 3. I'm going to divide by that leading coefficient of 2. Okay, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 3 divided by 2 cannot simplify, so I'm going to leave it as 3 over 2. Therefore, this first coefficient will be x plus 1 because it's a whole number, and the second one we're going to take 2x plus 3. You put the denominator in the front, the numerator in the back. Now we're going to double distribute and check, so here we go. This would give me 2x squared, this would give me 3x, this would give me 2x, and this would give me 3. When I combine, I get 2x squared plus 5x plus 3, which is back to my original answer. So there were 2 possible combinations here, but when you check it by double distributing, you get your correct answer. So this would be my answer. Okay, so example 3, I have 6y squared minus 4y minus 4. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check that GCF. We're going to do 6, 5. Remember, if it gives you a 1, there's not a GCF, so we go straight to the x. We're going to do 6 times negative 4, which is negative 24. And then I bring down that sum of negative 5. Okay, multiples of 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. If you need your factors, remember you can go to y equals, do 24 divided by x, and go to the table. It'll list them for you. Now I need to add to a negative 5. So this would add to 25 and subtract to 23. So no. This would add to 14, subtract to 10. This would add to 11, subtract to 5, possible. This would add to 10 and subtract to 2. Okay, so in order to get this to subtract and become a negative 5, I would have to do 3 minus 5. Minus 8. So I'm going to put a 3 here and a negative 8 here. Then we go back and we divide by that leading coefficient, which is a 6. Okay, so 3 over 6, if you want to do it in your calculator, just open up a fraction. 3 over 6, hit enter. Open up a fraction, negative 8 over 6, hit enter, and it'll simplify for you. This becomes 1/2, and this becomes negative 4/3. So therefore, this becomes a 2x plus a 1 for this side, and this becomes a 3x minus a 4. So that negative sign will always be a minus sign. If you double distribute, this gives me 6x squared, this gives me negative 8x, this gives me 3x, and this gives me negative 4. These two combine, I get 6x squared minus 5x minus 4, which is back to the original problem. Okay, so now it does say you try, but we're going to keep doing all the odds together. That leaves you with the evens. Okay, we're not going to have any GCFs until the bottom, so I'm going to quit checking for GCF until we get down to the bottom. Okay, so in my x, 3 times 10 is 30, and my sum has to be negative 11. So multiples of 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. Okay, this will add to 31, subtract to 29. This will add to 17, subtract to 13. This will add to 13 and subtract to 7. This will add to 11, subtract to 1. So this is my 1 because it adds to 11, but I need it to add to a negative 11. So I need to do negative 5 plus negative 6 to get to negative 11. So I put in a negative 5 and a negative 6. I go back and divide by that leading coefficient of 3. So negative 5 divided by 3 is still just negative 5/3. And negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. So this would become 3x minus 5, and this would become x minus 2 because it's just a whole number. You can double distribute and check your answer. For video's sake, I'm not doing that. Okay, 9m squared plus 3m minus 2, so 9 times negative 2, that would go to negative 18, top box, and then we put our sum in the middle, so 3. So 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, 4 no, 5 no, back at 6. Okay, if I add, this would add to 19, subtract to 17, not my number. This would add to 11, subtract to 7. This would add to 9, subtract to 3. So since I want it to be a positive 3, I need to do 6 minus 3. So I would put a negative 3 and a 6. I divide by that leading coefficient of 9. This will simplify to negative 1/3. When I divide by 3 over here, this becomes 2. So my factors would be 3m minus 1 and m plus 2, because that was just a whole number. Whoa, no. Hinson made a mistake. You're supposed to be dividing by 9, so this simplifies to 2/3. So this would be 3m plus 2. Glad I caught that before I kept going on. Okay, if you double distribute this, it will get you back. I was looking at my double distribution in my head, and I was like, why is this not working? So double distribute, you get back to your answer. Now, if you go to number 5, one more without a GCF, we're going to do 4 times 1, which is 4, and then my sum has to be negative 4. So multiples of 4 are 1 and 4, and 2 and 2. Okay, so 1 plus 4 is 5, 4 minus 1 is 3. Did not get me to my number. 2 plus 2 is 4. We got this. But I need it to be a negative 4. So I have to do negative 4 plus negative 2. So I put a negative 2 here and a negative 2 here. I divide by that leading coefficient of 4, and that simplifies to negative 1/2. I divide by that leading coefficient of 4, that simplifies to negative 1/2. So therefore, your answer would be 2. This is a minus 1, because 2 and then 1. And this would be a 2a minus 1. Or you could do 2a minus 1 squared. Either way would be fine. All right, now we're going to look for that GCF first. So I'm going to go math over to number 9. We're going to do 10 comma 75, which is a 5. And then I have to repeat math number 9. I take my answer of 5 comma 35. And the biggest thing I can divide out is a 5. They don't share letters, so don't worry about letters. We're going to take out that 5. When I take out 5, that leaves me 10 divided by 5 is 2, keep k squared. 75 divided by 5 is negative 15, keep k. And 35 divided by 5 is 7. Okay, in your x, you use the new piece. So 2 times 7 is 14, and my sum has to be negative 15. So 1 and 14, 2 and 7 are the only multiples. 1 plus 14 gives me 15. 2 plus 7 will give me 9, not mine. But in order to get to be a, why did I put negative 15? It's a positive 15. Hinson's just making all the mistakes. She can't read her own handwriting. Okay, so that would be a positive 15. So 1 plus 14 gives me 15. So I put 1 here, put 14 here. Now we divide by that leading coefficient of 5, which will give me 1/5. Divide by that leading no. The leading coefficient's not 5 anymore. I'm trying to rush myself. Don't rush yourself. The leading coefficient is 2. Remember, it changed. I just looked up here for the GCF. The leading coefficient is 2, so 1 divided by 2 will simplify to 1/2, and 14 divided by 2 will simplify to 7. So therefore, my factors will be 2k plus 1 and k plus 7, and then I bring my GCF back down and put a 5 on the front because that's the GCF, and the GCF goes on the front, not in the divide part. Okay, last problem. Maybe no mistakes on this one. To find out my GCF, math over to number 9, 15 comma 18. That gives me 3. Once I have that, math over to number 9, I type the answer 3 comma 24, and my GCF is 3. So I can divide everything by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5, and I keep the y squared. Negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6, and I keep the y. Negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. Okay, using the x with the new piece, 5 times -8 is -40, and my sum needs to be -6. So multiples of -40, we got 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8, and that's it. This would add to 41, subtract to 39. This would add to 22, subtract to 18. This would add to 14, subtract to 6. This would add to 13, subtract to 3. Okay, so to get this to subtract to a -6, we're going to have to do 4 minus 10, because I need that big number to be negative. Okay, now I divide by my new coefficient, leading coefficient, so I'm going to divide by 5. 4 divided by 5 cannot simplify, so 4/5. And -10 divided by 5 would give me -2. So my factors for this one would be 5y plus 4, denominator then numerator, and then y minus 2, and tack the GCF of 3 back on at the beginning, and you have your final answer. And if you have questions, please ask.